Haven't done a Newts Got Issues in a while, and today I was kind of out, running errands for the theater, and I stopped in the local comic shop when I was waiting for my lunch, and I saw this on the shelf from the DC Vault. It's got a shiny cover. Uh, can't really see it from how I'm sitting. Um, Batman, Robin Lives. This was the alternate version of the Death in the Family story. Obviously, Jim Starling wrote two different versions based on the 900 number. If Robin Jason Todd was going to live or die. And obviously, as we know, overwhelmingly people chose for Jason Todd to die. Actually, no, I think it was actually pretty close. And there's like an urban legend that like an accountant with an auto dialer was the one who kind of put it over the top. But so yeah, both concepts were done, and the one that we got was Jason dying. But in this version, he's alive. I had seen these pages in black and white in the past. Granted, 88. I'm 7 years old when this happens. My parents let me call the 900 number one time, and I voted for him to die. Was never a fan of Jason Todd, but he was my Robin growing up. I'm 42 years old, so that post crisis Robin was the one that I had in my formative years. Didn't take long for Tim Drake to pop up, but we knew Dick Grayson from obviously the TV series Batman, and people always kind of thought that on the surface Dick Grayson was gee whiz and all that stuff, but no, he wasn't. Especially when you get into like the Perez stuff and you get into Teen Titans and all that, and him leading to becoming Nightwing. Dick Grayson always had more edge, always had more characterization than people give him credit for. And obviously now with Nightwing, he's far more been represented far more. But at the time, most people's concept of Robin was the boy wonder, the Jiminy Jillikers one, and I think a lot of people didn't like Jason Todd for that simple reason. That when I was buying this issue, the dude at the comic shop was like, "How old are you?" And I told him I'm 42, and he's a little bit older than me. And he's like, "Yeah," he's like, he was kind of a twerp, and and I was like, I don't know if I saw him like as a twerp. I didn't see him as like being weaker. I just like vividly remember him like questioning Batman and going against Batman's wishes, and the stuff leading up to the Death in the Family storyline. It was also the very first time I asked my parents what CP was because they broke up a CP ring. Obviously, in the book, they say what it is. I'm using YouTube speak. I like now, like if you watch like true crime things, like they can't say like murder or suicide. They like blanket, and it's just like Jesus Christ. If you're watching this, you're allowed to hear, hurt words. Fuck. Uh, yeah, and then there was like a string of like hookers dead found in. I'm sorry, ladies of the night. YouTube, sorry, being found in dumpsters and stuff like that. And there's a little bit more of an edge to this era Batman, and rereading this issue with the change where Robin's mother still passes away from the explosion, and they still have the Joker getting diplomatic immunity from Iran, which I thought was so. I whenever I try to explain this to people, you go into the whole thing of like, okay, well, Jason Todd got caught stealing hubcaps off of the Batmobile, and Batman like just went to his apartment. Like, okay, back in the day, and I still do it, but I do it online more now. Myself and one of my exes, we used to like give out like toys and stuff like that to like the less fortunate on for holidays and stuff, or coats. And I remember going to like a YMCA and stuff where there was like apartments, and like people were living there, and there'd be like people out in the hallway and stuff like that. And rereading this, I was just thinking about that. I was like, if we went to the thing, and they went with us and knocked on doors and stuff like that, and there was like people out in the halls, and I was like, can you imagine like Batman, especially in the gray and blue suit, just walking into an environment like that, and people, I guess people in Gotham are just like, whatever. But it's so different than New Brunswick, New Jersey, But yeah, so going back, and he took in Jason Todd and trained him, and Jason, as he says in the book, he's like, he took to the training like a fish to water. But Jason had like a rebellious streak in him, and it turned out because he thought his mom was dead, but turned out his mom was actually alive, and she was a doctor, and she was in like the Middle East, and it turned she was working for the Joker, or the Joker had like dirt on her, and his dad, Jason's real dad, actually was working for Two-Face, and Two-Face had him killed. And when Jason had a chance to confront Two-Face, sort of like in Batman Forever, like they combine Dick Grayson and Jason Todd into one, he didn't kill him. And Batman was all like happy, and called him lad, and thought that like all the bad stuff was over. But it just made him more angry and more disruptive, and he like, I remember like once he like pushed a dude off a bridge, and he like, when they broke up the CP ring, he like went buck wild on these dudes, which he should have. Fuck pedophiles and pedophile enablers. I don't care. I wish Robin and Batman would be there to fuck shit up. Even if you just like deleted a hard drive before the cops could, like that's still fucked up. But Robin escapes. He runs away from home, goes to the Middle East to find his mom, and turns out the Joker was waiting for him. I like when the Joker's like in not Joker vibe, which I think they took. He's got like regular skin, not white skin, and like blue hair. They did that a lot, like Batman and Superman, because black looked weird. They would have blue hair in comics in the 80s and stuff. But the Joker had like, Caucasian skin and like blue hair, which was supposed to be black hair. He's speaking to the mother there, and working out all the stuff where they were actually poisoning the supplies that the UN was giving or whatever. The Joker winds up like becoming an ambassador for the Ayatollah at the time. And the Joker's given diplomatic immunity, like in Lethal Weapon 2. But in the book, the way that I read it, Robin is beaten basically to death with a crowbar, and then the Joker, to destroy all the evidence and to make sure that Robin couldn't have an open casket when Batman shows up, he blows up the thing. And that the issue, the way it was when I read it originally, is Batman looking back on how it was his fault that he took Robin in and trained him and all that. And Jim Starling's script for it was really, really well done. And all of the it's all done. Chapter 5 is all done through Bruce's thought process of why he thought he needed a Robin, and it led him to a point where he allowed all it's the Joker with the Caucasian skin. I also love in this issue they have all the original ads that were in the books at those times, which I thought was really a cool like tricks. They still make tricks. But this was such a vital. There's the Ayatollah. So okay. Here's cool. They used to have these in comics as well. I used to love looking at these, and they were always like from New York and California. But I always like to see if anything was ever local to me. To see, I was like, oh, they had that comic in there. And another cool thing they used to do. There's diplomatic immunity Joker. But they used to have the letters to the editors and stuff like that. And I don't know if they do that anymore. But bat signals and then the flash ones were called speed reading. And I used to love reading those. And I wrote a bunch of letters when I was a little kid, but none of them ever got printed. Yeah, so Robin blows up and his mom dies. And in the original version, he dies until they brought him back in the Lazarus pit and made him Red Hood. And he was dead for quite a while. And then we thought he came back during the Hush storyline, but it turned out to be Clayface. But I remember reading that in like '04, whenever that book came out, and be like, oh shit, they brought back Jason Todd. He had like a shuck of like white hair, but it wasn't him. Um, but in this one, Jason Todd survives the blast. His mother dies, and he's in a coma. And all they did, that you could see where the changes were. Instead of there's one coffin for the mom instead of two from the one we read, and he's dead. And then the book basically continues on more or less the same way, where Batman's told to meet the Joker in a specific spot, but it turns out that it's not that spot. It's the United Nations in New York, and Batman shows up, and Superman shows up, and Superman's like, you can't touch him. He has diplomatic immunity. And the two of them, Superman acts very much like he would, like he does in Miller's Dark Knight Returns, where he's an agent of the U.S. government at the time. So there's a lot of little things that you would see like that felt like continuations of the Miller stuff, or would go on to be in the Burton stuff, like the Joker wearing like regular skin color face paint for Caucasians people. That's regular skin color. And because I know I would say that, and then somebody who's not Caucasian would be like, "What the fuck, dude?" And I'd be like, "I didn't mean that. I just, stuff that the Joker would do that, the Jack Nicholson Joker." This is interesting. It's pretty interesting to see how they had both, both stories in the can just in case, and the image of all this lead up stuff of him finding the body and all was just like so huge when I was a kid. I just it's such a like core memory of that time period. The whole lead up to a death in the family, the whole getting to call the 900 number, the outpouring that it created in the media. People were like, well, they killed Robin, because they thought that Robin was still the Dick Grayson Robin, I think I was in like kindergarten when this came out, and I just remember talking about this book, on the bus with friends and stuff like that, and it was definitely the first time that I was like I don't know, because I was following storylines, but not to this degree where it's like, is it going to be Robin who dies? Is it going to be Alfred who dies? Is it going to be Commissioner Gordon who dies? That we all had like our own little ideas of what was going to happen. There's a Tengen Pac-Man. You can look up the gaming historian has a whole thing about Tengen, or just go read the Wikipedia article where a lot of those guys' videos come from. Mike Mignola did the cover, who would go on to do Hellboy, and this was such a fucking wild cover to be sitting on the newsstand, because there weren't comic book stores where I lived like there are now. I got this at 7-Eleven on the spinner rack, the Hey Kids Comics spinner rack, like that, just that image of a bloody fucking Robin, it just screamed at you to have to get. And I remember waiting for my dad to get, my parents weren't divorced yet, my dad to get home from work so that we could go to 7-Eleven to go pick it up. And on the way home, I remember I called my aunt who worked near there at like a pizza place and said, do they have it there? They have it there? And she said yes, so that I knew which one to go to. But like, yeah, these issues at this time, and then what came after it, like A Lonely Place for Dying and all that, where Batman was solo and he was far more violent, and then the Joker tries to gases the UN, and then Superman sucks all the gas in, but he goes like undercover as like a dude with suspenders and a mustache. This was a huge storyline for me growing up, and was such a great primer for Batmania that would happen in '89, and being up on these characters and the continuity for it, and then leading into when we eventually got Jason Tim Drake as Robin, and a lot of the stuff that came from the Lonely Place for Dying storyline, where you started to get to know Dick Grayson as Nightwing a little bit more. Like this period of time was where I really, really fell in love with comics, where it wasn't just fun issues where they're just standalone. To me, they were standalone stories like, oh, cool, Batman's using this gadget or whatever, or oh, Spider-Man's teaming up with the Fantastic Four here. Like there wasn't as much as a concept of what all of this meant. And then around this time was also when Invasion happened, which was a big crossover event. The first one kind of after Crisis on Infinite Earth. And while I had sporadic issues of Crisis on Infinite Earth in '86 when that was happening, death of Barry Allen, the death of Supergirl, stuff like that, it didn't quite have the same impact on me that it had when something like Invasion happened, or even like Zero Hour and things like that would come after it, where you had to kind of learn the previous continuity to see what was left behind or merged during Crisis to know where they were going in the future with things like Zero Hour, like Wave Rider and stuff, and they had like the 200th issue of Detective Comics where it had like a future story where the Joker like gets electrocuted, and it was basically just the exact same story as the Tunnel of Love from Dark Knight Returns, but just like repackaged for this book. Also they had like the issue. Mike Mignola did a really cool cover for I think like Batman number 50 or something that had this really nice little story in it where it's Batman sitting in a diner with drinking a cup of coffee, talking to the waitress, and I'll never forget that. It was like one of those early stories where I was like, oh, it doesn't have to all be pomp and circumstances. It can be these little interpersonal elements too, because I know that we were writing some stuff for Florida Man, and I had shown the artist that Batman story because I turned in something that was Florida Man as the overnight cook at a Waffle House in Jacksonville, Florida during spring break, and he's outside smoking a cigarette when the customer comes in, and then they have this whole conversation where he's kind of telling his story, but it's a far more grounded version of the wildness that we'll get in the other stories, but it was directly inspired by that. Also kind of came from the issue of Daredevil, where right after he had kind of broken all Bullseye's bones and they play Russian roulette that Miller wrote, something like that. There's kind of very quiet interpersonal moments. There's the same thing, the first time that really blew my mind. I don't know why this popped up. There's an episode of He-Man from when I was a little kid where Evil Lynn takes her helmet off and you see her hair for the first time, and they're just having a conversation where they're like by a fireside. And I was like, oh yeah, like it's not all fighting and shit and magic and all. Like it's these are characters. Like, and no matter how childishly they're written to sell toys or whatever, there still has to be some characterization for that to work. And these little things that kind of planted seeds in my head. And this is also before I knew that characters would come back constantly. Supergirl died in Crisis and was brought back as a fucking shape-shifting clone at one point when Lex Luthor had his brain put into his son, or his clone. I don't know. Superman one was a clone as well. Barry Allen died, but came back. But he also appeared in heaven a couple times in some Flash books. And then Hal Jordan, to make up for being the Parallax when he destroyed Coast City after Superman died. He became the Spectre for a while, and everybody comes back. Nobody stays dead in comics. Bucky came back as the Winter Soldier and all that, and eventually Jason Todd came back too. But at this time, I didn't. And there's an invasion thing. I just remember one of my biggest things is all the aliens were like creepy, like gray aliens, but they all had like a big red dot in their heads. And I remember Superman in Deep Space needed a breather, and just thinking that was like one of the covers was like one of the coolest fucking things ever. I was like, oh, Superman would need that to breathe in like deep space away from Earth's sun and all that. And I don't know, they just opened up an entire thing because my mom worked at at the time my mom worked at a real estate office, and I just remember going with her, getting dropped off to her office, and sitting and reading comics and Captain Atom when he teamed up with Batman at one point, Or there's this really weird Batman issue from Detective Comics where there's this big hulking monster Batman with green shit coming out of its mouth, and Bruce Wayne's like, tucked underneath of it. Or what, there was a whole story of Bruce Wayne thinking back on the day his parents were killed, and his dad has like this stock ticker, and Bruce does something, and his dad slaps him, and it was like one of the things, opening a memory from before they were shot and stuff. There's just a lot of these issues at that time, or the many deaths of Batman that happen where people keep dying, and they're all wearing the cape and the cowl and the outfit and stuff like that, and it's exploring this killer who's killing people dressed as Batman, which I think a lot of that showed up too in Nolan's The Dark Knight, where they had that, where the people, I'm not wearing hockey pads. But all this stuff, all are these weird core memories that are just like wedged into my brain forever, and it was cool to finally see, inked and colored, how the story could have gone if he was alive. But I think I like it better the way that it happened in reality. But these from the Vault ones, I don't know if they've done the other ones yet. I'm gonna have to look, but I'm sure there's a lot of DC lore that I'd only heard about from working at the comic shop or reading Wizard magazine or Comic Zine or something like that, that I'd like to see pulled out and explored a little bit more to see what if, what could have been. Thankfully the Joker no longer has diplomatic immunity. But what a weird thing to do in a comic back then, not even just like, we're gonna kill the Boy Wonder, and the ripples that created, but then they're like, all right, we're gonna kill Superman, see how that goes, eventually I'll get to that as well, because I have a lot of memories of the death of Superman, the funeral for a friend storyline, the rebirth Superman story with the 4 Supermen, and all the shit that came into that, all the stuff that led up to it with the introduction to what Doomsday was, getting certain copies, going through certain copies at the drugstores. It was near my dad's house then in 92 and 91 to find the first printings that were kind of wedged behind things, and standing in line to get the black bag Death of Superman issue and shit like that. Superman number 75. But yeah, I used to, this is the stuff that forged me in the fires of Mount Nerd, and stuff that I still have great fondness for to this day. For making me love comics and making me a reader, But yeah, so when I was out today, I'm glad I found this, and I'm going to go find the original issues that I have somewhere. I probably have the graphic novel as well. But I mean, just look at that cover, man. Like, how could you fucking pass that up? Yeah, that's it. That's something new for Newts Got Issues. And pretty soon my copies of Coney Waves will be here, and then I'll talk about the book I worked on that came out a couple days ago. And yeah, thanks for joining me.